What was this world like before all of the new bosses and regions? Ah, huh? Where am I?
You are in the abyss, Gmo.
Why the abyss? I thought I was supposed to respawn in Lumbridge.
Normally, yes, but I'd like to show you something.
What's that?
I'd like to take you on a journey to 2015 before returning you to present day.
But why 2015?
That is the year you first stepped foot into Gillinor. Now teleport to Lumbridge and explore the old world.
What happened to the graphics? Ew. What was RuneScape like 10 years ago? This is a very important year for both myself and Oldschool Runescape. This was the year I renewed my membership and started playing the game again. 2015 was also very important for Oldschool Runescape as it was the first year Jagex really considered big updates outside of a few quality of life features. 2015 really shaped the future of Oldschool Runescape. There were a few things added in 2013 and 2014, such as Motherlode Mine, Nightmare Zone, and Rooftop Agility. But overall, it was mostly quality of life updates and bug fixes. We also didn't have RuneLight yet. We had a very primitive version being OS Buddy. It had some of the features of RuneLight, such as XP trackers and your cannonball counters, but it didn't have most of the bigger things like quest helper and tile markers, and even some of the smaller things that some people added in themselves. Early in January 2015, Zulrah was released. This boss, when released, was the most difficult and consistently profitable boss upon release. From Zulrah, we could receive the Toxic Blowpipe, Trident of the Swamp, and the Serpentine Helm. It also introduced the Venom mechanic, which is now used by multiple monsters in the game. On January 22nd, Jagex gave us an additional 200 bank spaces. At the end of the month, banknote exchange merchants were added to Remington, the Bandit Camp, Karamja, and Polonevnich. February was one of the biggest months for shaping the future of Oldschool Runescape. The first big update we received was the Dragon Defender. This item stood as the best in slot melee offhand for years to come. 2015 also paved the way for the death system we currently have now. It is a little bit different now, but it was the start of it. In the early days of Oldschool Runescape, there were major server issues and players disconnected far too frequently. After death, your items remained on the floor for 30 minutes and nobody could pick them up. The original timer was approximately 2 minutes and other players could loot your items. Later in the month, Jagex released one of probably the biggest influential updates over the entirety of Oldschool Runescape. This was permanent free-to-play. This update allowed new players to experience the game before committing to pay to play the game. At the end of the month, Jagex released a controversial update for the time, being the Grand Exchange. This allowed players to trade items through a network rather than spending hours spamming in the Falador Park or the West Bank of Varrock. March added achievement diaries. These diary rewards had various perks dependent on the tier of the tasks you completed. Various teleport options, increased pickpocket chance, mole locator, just to highlight a few. Jagex also released boss pets for the wilderness bosses this month. A big questing update was released with the ability to use spacebar to skip through quest dialogue and just dialogue in general, as well as the number keys to select dialogue options. The Kraken boss could also be instanced in this update. Jagex also released membership bonds at the end of the month, allowing players to purchase these with in-game currency and play the game entirely free to play. In April, Jagex pitched a few things that would eventually get released into the game but failed their original polls. Wild Gothic Sleeps was pitched along with the Dragon Claws. They failed their polls, but we would see them released into the game later. Dragon Claws being released almost 2 years later with Chambers of Xeric, and Wild Gothic Sleeps being released over 9 years later. The Motherlode Mine upper level expansion was also released early in the month. The Crystal Halberd finally received a special attack, with it still being one of the best special attacks on certain bosses. A huge quality of life update was released this month as well, with fairy rings not requiring the Draymond staff as long as you had the Lumbridge Elite Diaries. It's a pretty high requirement and still isn't accessible to everybody, but it is also very powerful. Zulrah also received another update this month with mutagens. These were rare, cosmetic, untradeable overrides for the Serpentine Helm. May was a relatively slow month in terms of updates, but it did have another update that didn't quite make it into the game until 2024. This update would be Slayer Partners. This month also allowed players to imbue the Ring of the Gods. The servers were still having some pretty big issues with disconnections and lags, so they updated untradables to not be lost on death outside of a PvP death. They also increased the amount of time items would stay on the floor when you died. And Jagex also released the World Switcher option above the Logout option. June added one of my favorite updates with resizable mode. I personally play on full screen, but many players still play on the default size. They also added the ability to hide your chat box entirely. Towards the middle of the month, Jagex allowed us to clear our private chat history. Jagex also added the advanced options menu due to it being cluttered. It has since been reworked again due to all the available options in the game. For all the clue hunters out there, this is the month that they allowed you to collect one of each clue tier. Previously, you could only carry one clue in general, and that also includes in your bank. Platinum tokens were first introduced into the game for the players with absurd amounts of cash. Bosses also added a peek option to the entrances to check if any players were currently in that room. Getting into the second half of the year, in July, Jagex allowed us to check what step we are on our clue scrolls. The Calphite layer received a massive shortcut, and I think it saves about 2 minutes. It requires the completion of the Elite Desert Diary. The Apatol Agility course received a fairy ring, making it easier to get back to the Agility course. Jagex added an extra 2 Grand Exchange offer slots for members. July also added rule presets to the Duel Arena, as well as anti-scamming measures. Rest in peace to the Duel Arena. Purdue was added to the upstairs general store to sell back all of your achievement diary gear if you have lost it. Towards the end of July, Jagex wanted to host their very first PvP tournament, which turned into a complete and utter disaster. They intended to stream the tournament, but they were getting DDoSed, making it impossible for them to be able to stream it, and they had to cancel the tournament entirely. Jagex added the music cape as well as the guitar emote. Another influential change to the game was customizable F keys. A construction quality of life feature was also added this month, with the option to call your servant directly to you while you are in your player-owned house. August added the experience drops as well as the tracker to set your goals. This same update added Tezhar and Jad Slayer tasks along with the Jad pet. You not lucky. We had another pitch this month for something that wouldn't make it into the game for years to come, but it is coming. That would be sailing. The skill was originally pitched on August 7th, 2015. Jagex also gave us the option to change our camera zoom for the first time by scrolling on your mouse wheel. Slayer Masters could reward you with an herb sack holding 30 of each grimy herb for 750 Slayer points. Boss tasks were also added into the game for the first time for a 200 point unlock. We also received the minimum total level worlds for the first time, one of each tier, with 1250, 1500, 1750, and 2000 total levels required to enter these worlds. Clicking the compass to face north was also added to the game. A new Slayer boss was added to the game at the end of the month, being Cerberus. Cerberus dropped various crystals to create the new best in slot boots for each combat style. Cerberus also dropped the Smoldering Stone, which can be combined with the Dragon Axe or Pickaxe to create the Infernal variants. These either burned logs or smelted the ore and consumed them, giving 1/3 the normal XP. Cerberus also dropped one of my favorite pets, being the Hell Puppy. This Slayer update also added the ability to set your boss Slayer task length between 3 and 35. Early in September, Jagex added a tracker to show which Barrows brothers you have killed, as well as a rewards interface to see your exact rewards. Previously, the items would just appear in your inventory, and you wouldn't really know what you got if you got runes. Saradomin's Light was added to the game, which is a consumable to permanently remove the darkness in the Zamorakian section of God Wars. Slayer received more buffs this month as well. Many monsters were moved around from different masters to be more in line with their respective level brackets. Multiple monsters also had their spawns increased or even extended the area in which they spawned. The Sell 50 option was added to the shops for the first time. Kazari Jungle received a shortcut requiring 79 agility. The toggle to teleport outside of your POH was added in-game from the teletabs as well as the spell. In the middle of the month, Jagex added Slayer extensions to different monsters in the game. Neve's Slayer Cave received an expansion in this update as well. This update had almost every possible Slayer monster in the game, and it made it so you almost never had to leave Tree Gnome Village if you were doing a Slayer task with Neve. It was deemed pretty overpowered though, and got nerfed a few years later. The Angler's outfit was also added to the possible drops from the fishing trawler. On the first day of October, Jagex released the Abyssal Sire. This boss was a Slayer boss for Abyssal Demons. This boss added the Abyssal Dagger and the Abyssal Bludgeon to the game. This item is still used as one of the best crush weapons available. Towards the middle of October, Jagex released their first temporary game mode with Deadman mode. It had PvP unlocked everywhere, but towns were protected by guards. Upon death, you would lose 50% of your total XP with 5 skills you could permanently protect. If you were PK'd, players could raid your bank for up to 28 items. In the middle of the month, the Max Cape was also added to the game. At the time, only around 150 players had max 99 in every skill. I started playing Old School around November. At this time, they added 4 different skilling pets to the game: the beaver, the rock golem, the heron, and the baby Chinchampa. The monster examine spell was also added to the game at this time. This spell would allow you to see various different stats about each NPC in the game. For the first time, players were also able to change their attack priority options. Max Capes received the ability to be combined with their respective best in slot capes for each combat style. Jagex also added the AFK Zulrah scale fishing method. This requires 87 fishing to fish the sacred eels and 72 cooking to use your knife on the eels for the Zulrah scales. A Grand Exchange History button was also added to the game at this time. December was another slow month. However, Jagex added the Skill Cape perks. Some perks being extremely useful, while others not so much. At the end of the year, Jagex pitched one of the most content-packed updates to date. This would be the new region, Zaya. It would offer the new Necromancy spellbook, Blast Mining, Blood and Soul Runecrafting, as well as Lizardman. However, that is an update for next year. Thank you for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe. Peace.